Hey everybody. The topic today is variance. Wonderful, wonderful, not sexy, plain variance, but so incredibly important and incredibly effective and potentially not as well understood as it would be to benefit everybody. So if you think about what CrossFit is defined as, right? Constantly varied functional movements at high intensity. And that little sentence can be an hour-long presentation as to what it actually means. That first little part, constantly varied, right? Constantly varied functional movements at high intensity. It's easy to blow right past that constantly varied part because functional movements are just so cool. You get to talk about weightlifting and all these things and how the human body interplays in the world and high intensity. Wow, I mean, nothing quite feels like high intensity. So there's a topic that gets a lot of attention. But that first part, constantly varied, this is just my opinion, but I think that is one of the most powerful and potent aspects of CrossFit. Right there, holding its footing equally with functional movements and high intensity. And we've chatted before about not that classic error of people who don't really understand CrossFit and think that variance means random and haphazardly doing things. That's not the case. So I'm going to assume that the audience I'm talking to has that baseline of knowledge that variance does not mean random. But variance is one of those beautiful things that to this day I still love. That when any particular workout comes up, it's like, oh wow, I'm going to try to do this today, and it's quite different than what I did yesterday. This is requiring a different skill set. This is going to get me, or part of this workout is going to get me a bit outside of my comfort zone. And that glorious, beautifully, intelligently designed, appropriately placed variance, all it's attempting to do is just little by little give more breadth and depth to what you can successfully accomplish on planet Earth. Your skill set improves, your strike zone widens, and so there's more things that if they cross your path on planet Earth, you go, okay, I haven't done exactly that, but I've done something similar, so I feel relatively confident. That is what variance can give you, and it's a very powerful tool in the realm of GPP to building confidence and just giving you, the ability to do whatever. Now here's the tricky part, especially if you're doing your own programming. We all have our biases, right? We all have things that we like to do and things that we don't like to do. And so it can be really easy if you're just programming for yourself to little by little start including more and more of what you truly enjoy and little by little kind of excluding those things that are kind of outside your wheelhouse or don't make you look like such a spectacular athlete when you do them, or your friend's going to beat you, and so those don't get programmed as much. Hey, at least you're not on the couch, right? I mean, so there's my glass half full take on that, even if you're doing biased programming. At least you're not sitting on the couch. You're doing great things. Congratulations. You're in the game. You're on board the home team for the big win. But if we're talking about maximizing what you can do, variance is almost unequaled, and we got to get variance in the game. And so you either need to have a lot of discipline if you're programming for yourself to make sure that you're not neglecting those things, or obviously, that's what I do for a living, follow somebody that you enjoy, that you at least trust as competent and will give you that variance. And I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, I don't care what anybody out there likes to do. I don't give the backside of a rat about what anybody likes to do. Variance is going to be served up every single day, whether people smile or frown. We're going to do what's effective. And so the other thing I would say is there are some traps that you can fall into. Don't let what you are programming or exposing yourself to, and I'm talking about the general population here, okay? I'm not talking about your sponsored athlete and how you do at a competition is either going to feed your family and pay your bills or not feed your family and pay your bills. I'm not talking about that segment of society. I'm talking about the rest of us, most regular folks, okay? Just whether you're a first responder, police, firefighter, military, mom, dad, average Joe, doesn't matter. variance is going to be your friend, because life is not a organized competition that has to only program certain things that fit inside 50-foot lanes or have other logistical considerations. Life has no rules to play by. It don't care, so it's going to throw whatever it wants at you. So again, we care about variance and true variance. You might say something like, and I'll get into this later, but something like the CrossFit Open, which is phenomenal. But I would almost bet my life that we'll see some variation of toes to bar or something, but you probably won't see a knees to elbow. You'll see a toes to bar in the Open far more than you'll see a knees to elbow. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean the knees to elbow is a bad movement, doesn't have utility and value, or it's less effective at developing the midline than the toes to bar? No, as a matter of fact, I would staunchly say the opposite. I would say if I could only do one of those two movements for the remainder of my time on this planet, I would do knees to elbows and not toes to bar. Knees to elbows, true knees to elbows, not knees to armpits or knees to triceps. Knees to elbows require much more flexion at the midline. You got to pull your hips up far higher. They're quite frankly much more tougher and demanding than a toes to bar. However, they're way harder to judge, because was it knees to elbows or was it knees to triceps? On the toes to bar, the feet swing backwards, the 2 feet, bong, they hit the bar, that's it. Good to go. Done. Rep. Counted. Far easier to judge. So there are some things, and that's not a slam on anything, by the way, that's just if you're running a competition, there are certain considerations that you have to take into place to try to keep it fair, consistent. Is it easy to judge? Is it not easy to judge? Is it easy to film? How much space does somebody have? Just the real world. Talking about the real world here, people. So don't let those things jade what you do in your programming if you're actually concerned about having the biggest and broadest breadth and depth of skills that you can. Variance is your friend. So we talk about things like weightlifting. Everyone loves weightlifting, right? Moving some external objects. You can squat, deadlift, press, snatch, clean and jerk. And then even in those subsets, if we're talking about variance, what are we talking about with a squat? Do you just back squat all the time because you love to back squat? And do you neglect the front squat? And do you neglect the overhead squat? That might be something to look into. Same with the press, push jerk, split jerk. Are you doing them all? Do they all have value? To throw in some dumbbells every now and then? And of course with the snatch and the clean and jerk, there's a ton of different ways that we can modify each one of those, from the hang or from the floor, full power, the whole 9 yards. And with that weightlifting, you could even break things down further if you're talking about variance and developing overhead strength. How are you developing your overhead strength? Is it just through one of those things? Is it just always a push jerk or always a split jerk? Variance, in my opinion, exposing yourself to a broad range of these skills will improve you as an athlete in ways that don't readily make sense. And if you want to do some reading on this, I would recommend reading, I've got it pulled open here. It's a CrossFit Journal article from April 5th, 2017 by Tony Leland. It's called CrossFit and GPP. And I wholeheartedly agree with a bunch of sentiments in this article. And about midway or halfway through, he has a couple old quotes from Greg Glassman in there that I think are spot on about CrossFit and GPP, general physical preparedness, which you're not going to get GPP without variance. It says GPP is the most underdeveloped and neglected aspect of athletic training, especially in elite athletes. It produces, every athlete we've worked with, even profoundly high-level athletes, after a session or two, you will find some deficiencies that they have in their game, because most people bias their training and they only do what they like, and they do it over and over and over. It's relatively repetitive. And then when you expose these athletes to a wide range of variance, when we're talking 1 reps to hundreds of reps to just body weight movements to short time domains, medium time domains, long time domains, the whole 9 yards, light to heavy loading, you're going to find something that athlete has probably been neglected, and it will become readily apparent that they have a deficiency. And this article goes on basically saying that fixing these deficiencies has an immediate benefit within your sport, very often in ways not quite obvious mechanically or metabolically. For instance, more pull-ups make for better skiing. So they had a downhill skier that they identified had basically terrible pull-ups or no pull-ups, got that downhill skier pull-ups, and their skiing improved. How does that make sense? I don't know. My theory is that the human body is one piece. And so you've got this one system all trying to function in harmony, and if you identify somewhere in this system that there's a glitch, there's a deficiency, there's something that's not as optimally developed as these other areas of the system, that shoring that weakness up is kind of like a rising tide lifts all ships. That is somewhat the point of this article here, and that has been what I have seen over and over and over again in my last 16 plus years of programming, teaching, training, all things CrossFit, which is why I'm such a huge proponent of variance. And like I said, all of us have our biases. But getting back to what I was saying, you might feel like you're pretty good pressing overhead, right? Well, there's multiple ways that you can press overhead. Maybe you just shoulder press and you're like, yeah, I'm great overhead. But I wrote down a quick list here of, okay, well, you could get overhead and develop overhead strength by shoulder press, push jerk, split jerk, wall balls, thrusters, handstand push-ups, kipping and strict, static handstand holds, handstand walking, Turkish get-ups, descent from handstand practice, SOTS press, snatch balance, etc., etc. The list goes on and on. So when you think about variance, are you developing overhead pressing strength in 1 or 2 ways, or are you developing it in those 15 different ways that I just spoke about right there? And then even for more variance, those 15 different ways that I just mentioned, just your overhead strength, we could make a same list for pulling from the ground, hinging at the hip, going below parallel, etc., etc. Well, that long list that I just gave of various ways to develop overhead strength, now we can play that same game with each one of those 15 different ways. We can play with the loading. We can play with the rep range. We can play with the time domain. Is it a multi-round workout? Is it just a strict heavy day? Is it interval training? Are we pairing it with a movement that is complementary and therefore does not interfere with the overhead pressing? Or are we intentionally putting in another movement that does interfere and now taxing and demanding the overhead strength even more because we're intentionally fatiguing that? It's darn near limitless. And if you are doing that with your training, after 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks of workouts like that, you'll probably have a really good idea of your strengths, your weaknesses. Have you biased your training in some certain way, shape, or form? And now where are some places that you should focus and move forward? And that is what variance will give you. And it's humbling, okay? Because we all like to look great when we work out and post a fast time. But if you expose yourself to enough variance, you will not be on the top of the leaderboard every day. And if you are on the top of the leaderboard every day, you're most likely so amazing that I'm watching you work out professionally, or something screwy's going on. Let's see. So yeah, getting back to just not biasing your training for, in my opinion, if you're actually training for life and not a competition, there are some things you don't see come up in most competitions, and I just hope people don't think that that negates their training value, because that would be such an error. We mentioned knees to elbows versus toes to bar, and I'll go to war on that one. You're probably not going to see a 5K run in the open. Probably won't see a 5K run in a lot of competitions. Does that mean a 5K run does not have benefit? Absolutely not. It's just a logistical consideration of a training versus a competition environment. Med ball cleans. I could do a whole episode on med ball cleans. Med ball cleans can be one of those things that immediately helps identify if somebody is a bit pretentious. It's like, it's a nice beginner's movement, but do you know how advanced I am? Do you know how impressive my squat clean and jerk is? What am I going to do with a med ball clean? Go fire me up a set of 200 legit med ball cleans. Let me know how you're feeling. So medicine ball cleans are awesome and they're fantastic. And so are regular cleans, the whole 9 yards. But they would be a nightmare in a competition or in the open or something like that. So you're probably not going to see them come up. Well, does that mean you shouldn't be training them? I think that would be an error because I don't think you should train for a competition unless, again, you're a sponsored athlete that's paying the bills, keeps food in your kid's belly. But for the rest of us, if we're training for real life, everything's on the table. Everything. Push-ups. Old school push-ups. Fantastic. Hardest part of Cindy every time that they come up. Probably not going to see them come up that frequently in competition. Done fast. It's really tough to make sure somebody got a full lockout if they're just blitzing them. Does that mean you shouldn't train them? I think that would be an error. Same with air squats. Somebody cycling really fast air squats. What a beautiful, gorgeous, high power, foundational to life movement. Probably not going to see them come up in competition a lot. Again, there's a difference between life and competition, and if we're training for life, everything's on the table. Variance is your friend, and not only your friend, going back to this article from 2017, potentially true variance with GPP, one of the most neglected aspects of training. Exposing yourself to variance will help you identify some things that maybe you didn't even know were deficiencies, and then addressing those deficiencies will overall make you a fantastic athlete. So variance is wonderful. We're big fans of it at CrossFit Linchpin. Like I said, and I mean that with all respect and love, I program every workout every day based upon what I truly think will move the needle forward for most people. And in no way, shape, or form do I take into account what people like. Because who likes to do 400-meter repeats? Some people, but not a lot. So most people left to their own devices would not program a lot of 6x400-meter repeat days or 3x800-meter repeat days, things of that nature. But we're going to do what's effective, now what's popular. So variance, and again, if you are a CrossFit nerd like myself, I would recommend going to the CrossFit Journal and typing in CrossFit and GPP, April 5th, 2017, by Tony Leland. Have a wonderful day, and we will talk later.